Hello and welcome to The Alternative to Being a Worldly Person, the channel with Jake, the person. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, a sizable part of the midweek meeting that we had was focused on how to improve our skills in the door-to-door field ministry. That's a thing where we would go and knock on people's doors and try and give them magazines and Bibles and a handshake and a smile and say, hey buddy, why don't you come join my religion if you don't want to die at Armageddon? And we would have discourses and demonstrations on how to get better at doing that thing. One of the things that we would have to focus on was conversation stoppers. There was even a section in the back of an old ancient book called Reasoning from the Scriptures. Because when you're trying to convert people to your religion, you tend to hear a lot of the same excuses from people, and there was a helpful little section on how to deal with the common excuses that people would give.
Cisco, and this is Shane. May I ask your name?
Ian.
It's nice to meet you, Ian. We're discussing a question that many people ask about God.
God? I don't think I believe in God.
You're certainly not alone in questioning whether God exists. But may I ask,
have you always felt that way?
Now that I am an ex-Jehovah's Witness, I face the same thing when trying to convince Jehovah's Witnesses that I'm not crazy.
You're the crazy one, I'm smart!
The first thing I learned was don't do that. One conversation stopper has come up a couple of times in an email I got from a listener and in a comment from an active Jehovah's Witness. And basically, the conversation stopper is, I don't care. When you're waking up from your cult indoctrination, you realize that this is not really the truth, and you try and explain to people what you're feeling, you generally are trying to put your best arguments forward. You've done your research, or you have some feeling deep inside. And what I encountered, and what apparently a lot of other people encounter, is a unexpected rejoinder, which is, I don't care. Rita says, whatever, the point is we are heading toward Armageddon. You can argue how right you are up to the day of Armageddon if you like. Who really cares? This was in response to a video that I made, where I went in detail debunking the scriptural proofs that witnesses use to prove that Russia, modern-day Russia, is the prophesied king of the north from the book of Daniel. I thought my reasoning was pretty ironclad, but Rita says, well, whatever. Even if all of their reasoning is wrong, who cares? The point is that Armageddon is coming. I also got this same sort of mentality from a recent viewer email. They were telling me about trying to explain their position to their spouse, and their spouse, after hearing all this, basically said, well, I don't really care if they're absolutely right about everything, you know, all this 1914 stuff, all of this doctrinal stuff, even the child abuse stuff. I don't really care. I just like this routine that I have, or I just think it's a good lifestyle for me. It makes me happy, so I don't care. I experienced the same thing as well. I met with the elders when I first started experiencing doubts, and I brought a bunch of research I had done about 1914 and 607, and I laid it all out, and I was very proud of how I laid it all out, and I gave it to them, and met with them a few days later, so they had time to read what I wrote, and they basically came at me with, who cares? We don't know if we're right about this, we might be wrong, but don't you think Jehovah knows that? And the important thing is that we just make it to the new system, and he's gonna correct us on all this stuff with the new scrolls. This can be tough. You know, we pride ourselves on being right and on being able to prove all of our talking points, but what if you're just met with, I don't care? That can seem to be a kind of insurmountable conversation stopper because, well, I guess if you don't care, then screw you. Just enjoy doing what you're doing, I guess. But this is obviously a deflection. It's a disingenuous argument. They do care, because if they didn't care, then they wouldn't care that you do care. They wouldn't care that you're leaving, right? If it didn't really matter. So they do care, but they've decided to land on this argument. And it's obviously a very defeatist argument. It's almost an admission that they don't really have a good comeback for what you're saying. But I do think it taps into something for people, which is not everybody cares about all the little details that make the truth true. Right now in the midweek meeting, witnesses are going over a book written by Watchtower where they break down all of the little prophecies in the book of Ezekiel and go into what all the symbolic language means, and some people are really into that, and some people snooze through that part of the meeting, or they turn their Zoom cameras off. They just don't care. All of the stuff about prophecy and what makes the Bible true isn't really important to them. What's important to them is the community, it's the routine, it's the fact that they were born in it. It gives them an identity. It's a born identity. It's a born supremacy. It's a born ultimatum, whatever you want to call it. Sorry if the reflection of the ring light is distracting. I'm not a good gillionaire who can afford to take his glasses off right now. I could just take the glasses off. But I think I'm going to hold my glasses emphatically for emphasis like a scientist in a movie. So, are they saying I don't care because they just care about something different? So let's talk about how to overcome the conversation stopper. Maybe it is that they just don't care about the same thing that you're really passionate about. Maybe their relationship to the religion is not the fine details, is not the true part of it. It's the identity part of it, the emotional connections they have, the community. And if that's the case, they might not really care about something like 1914 or whether or not all the little puzzle pieces fit together that make Russia the king of the North or the United Nations the beast in Revelation or whatever. So here's how I've dealt with that with some success. First of all, it's important to you, and if you're explaining this to somebody who cares about you, like a family member or spouse or just a close friend, they should care that you care. So obviously, it's something that you're passionate about, and you can just talk about why it's important to you instead of why they should care about it. And you can focus on why it's important to you. Try and help them understand why it's important to you and why it's important that the thing that's important to you is not correct. The other thing, though, is that witnesses do have to care whether or not they actually care, because part of being a Jehovah's Witness is having to teach people. That's why we had those midweek meetings about conversation stoppers in the first place. We have to be able to explain our beliefs to the people whose doors we knock on. So they have to be in a position where they are able to explain why this thing is true. It may not be important to like their heart and their connection to the religion, but they do have to be able to explain why it's true and why it makes sense. And if they don't care about it, are they really willing to teach somebody that thing? If it's not important, then why are you asked to teach other people about it? What happens when on your Bible study you have to explain 1914? Are you willing to explain something that you don't care about and don't fully understand and maybe don't even fully believe in? Because the biggest thing, and I think this is the ultimate way to overcome these kind of blocks, is then why do we call it the truth? If it's not all true, what about it is true? And how can you be sure that that part's true if you aren't sure that this other part is true? If it is the truth, then why do you seem to care about the evidence that makes it true so little? So if somebody responds with, I don't care, then you can hit them with, you're supposed to. And you can wave your glasses at them like this. If you have encountered this particular conversation stopper, how have you handled it? Why am I wrong? What did I mess up this time? That was just a short video about something that's been on my mind. I hope you found it helpful. If so, join this cool list of people scrolling up and down depending on what side of the screen I decide to put it on. They support the channel by giving me money for goods and services, because they know I got the goods right here and I'll service you with it.
Good morning. My name's Francisco, and this is Francisco. May I ask your name?
Ian.
I'm very sorry to hear that, Ian.
Me too.
We're discussing a question that many people ask about God.
God?
Yes, how do we know that our suffering is punishment from God?
God?
Yes,
Really?
yes. Please notice what we read here at Francisco 1:13. When under trial, I'm being tried by God.
God?
Exactly. And what comforting assurance do we find in the end of the verse?
That my mother got sick and my father left us.
Exactly. Many people have struggled to understand why bad things happened. The Bible's answer may surprise you.
God?
Exactly. Notice the first part of this verse. When we face trials, we may feel like we're being tried or tested by Francisco, but is that really the case?
Of course.
Let me assure you, you're certainly not the first to feel that way.
I can relate in some ways.
And what comforting assurance do we find in the end of the verse?
That me and my brother trying to take care of mom until she died.
We agree.